If you were alive between 1995 and 2000, you know that as the greatest boot up noise of all time. The Sony PlayStation easily lands itself at the number 8 spot on my list, not just for this boot up noise, though that could probably get it in the top 10 alone, but for its impact on the industry, superb game library, superb controller, and just all around being awesome. Now, the first time I got to play a PlayStation, it was 1997. I went over to my buddy Steven's house, and his parents had just got him one. And I just sat there watching him play, being amazed at what I was seeing. I didn't see this on my buddy's Sega Saturn, I didn't see this on my Genesis for sure, and the Super Nintendo that my buddy Chris had, it looked lame in comparison. The PlayStation was cool, it was new, and it worked. Let me go ahead and give you a little bit of rundown about the console though, just for those who don't really know a whole lot about it. The Sony PlayStation started off actually as a Super Nintendo CD-based attachment, much akin to the Sega CD. However, when Nintendo found out that Sony had put a clause in there on their contract that they would actually be receiving more profits from the games than Nintendo would be, Nintendo went ahead and backed down from the partnership with Sony, instead going with Philips.
You know what they say, all toasters toast toast,
which they would also back down from. Sony was pretty ticked off. They really wanted to make this. They wanted to be a part of the game console industry, and because of that, they didn't give up. They decided to go ahead and create a full-fledged console, not just an attachment. And when it came out, it was a force to be reckoned with. CD-based games were known, but not really popular yet. The Sega CD didn't really sell too well, neither did the 3DO, Philips CDI, or the Sega Saturn. But the PlayStation truly brought CD-based gaming to the forefront. It showed off what a CD-based game can do by having a superb partnership with third-party developers like Konami and Capcom. And the rest is pretty much history. With over 100 million consoles sold and hundreds upon hundreds of games in its library, the PlayStation 1 is easily one of the top consoles of all time. If you just went by pure sales, it is the number 2 home game console of all time. It has sold that many units. Now, looking at the design of the console, it's not really anything to look at. I mean, it doesn't look too much cooler than like a Sega Genesis perhaps, but it does have its own little unique thing. The sort of giant circle in the middle for the CD, you have the power buttons there, and some venting on the sides. Not really a whole lot to look at. But the cool thing for me was memory card slots. In every other game console before this one was launched, there was no such thing as a memory card slot. You had a battery inside your game pack, and that was it. That's how you saved your game. In the case of the Sega Saturn, you have a RAM cartridge that you could save things to, or very, very limited internal memory, but there's no way to actually swap that out and just have a ton of different memory cards with different games. The PlayStation went ahead and fixed all that. Memory cards became a standard for pretty much every game console from that point forward. The controller for the PlayStation was really unique and original as well. They couldn't really rip off Nintendo or Sega's own designs, so they came up with something completely unique, and it ended up being one of my favorite controllers ever. The D-pad is really good, super awesome. The button layout, great. 2 shoulder buttons on either side, the 4 in the face gave you 8 solid buttons to use, that if you don't count start and select. That's a perfect amount. That gives me the exact amount of control I would ever need in a game. After the launch of the Sega Saturn's 3D controller, and later on the Nintendo 64 with its analog stick, Sony decided to go ahead and throw an analog stick of their own on their controller as well. But instead of being lame and only putting one on there, they went ahead and put 2, and it was awesome. And that actually did set a standard for the industry, because look at every modern controller now, 2 analog sticks. Another cool thing about the PlayStation 1 is that PlayStation 2 controllers work on it. Awesome. I only have to buy controllers for the PlayStation 2 and they work across the console. Pretty sweet. The games for the PlayStation 1 originally came in these giant cardboardy plastic boxes. They weren't really space-saving, and they were just giant and clunky. So Sony went ahead and opted to use jewel cases, the same kinds that they use for audio CDs. You know, they worked rather well. They're pretty sturdy, but for me, I personally find them easily breakable. I've had a lot of these jewel cases crack and moves and just shuffling things around in the past. So I went ahead and opted to put my games into DVD cases, as you guys probably saw in my cover project video. If not, there's a link. And having them in DVD cases makes them look pretty awesome next to your PS2 games, just saying. But what would the PlayStation 1 be without games? And when you compare it to its competition at the time, the PlayStation had the largest plethora of games available. You had fighting games, you had racing games, you had sports games, you had extreme sports games, you had music games, you had tactical espionage action, you had a kart racer, you had RPGs that really brought RPGs into the mainstream. The PlayStation 1 is a masterpiece of a console. It did everything right and truly solidified Sony's place in the game console market that they still exist in today. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and to buy or sell any of the games or consoles discussed in this episode, go ahead and visit GameGavel.com, the only auction site built by gamers for gamers without the high eBay fees.